Reignited, Béal, members and supporters of Clanneireann and Náisiúnta, the national shield of Clanneireann, our new nationalist group, which was formed for the purpose of representing authentic Irish nationalism in the 21st century. No better place to come than here to Béal na Bláth, to the anniversary and commemoration of the death of General Michael Collins. Because here, even the weather is expressing the gloom of what occurred on this day so many years ago. If you're opposed to the treaty of 1921, then what happened here is perhaps just a personal tragedy that happened to a particular man who signed the wrong treaty. But if you come from the perspective, the broader perspective of Irish history and Irish manhood, you realise that more than one man died here, and that there was more than one tragedy here. That the great tragedy of the Irish independence movement, which was hundreds and hundreds of years old, and yet here at this corner of County Cork, the great disaster happened. The man who should have led Ireland in its first years of freedom and independence. Whatever you think about how much freedom we have, or whatever you think about the limitations on the treaty, it was, as he said, our freedom to achieve freedom. And yet, by the roadside here, he died. Shot, who knows? The conspiracy theories abound as to whether he was shot by the Free State side or whether he was shot straightforwardly by the Republican ambush. But throughout the country, when it happened, pro and anti-treaty alike recognised that a great disaster had befallen us, where we had lost that great man, and whatever his faults and whatever his virtues, the freedom to achieve freedom that he believed he had brought home was gone, because it would be betrayed by his successors in the Free State government. And it would be betrayed and betrayed and betrayed again. The 6 counties of the north would be abandoned. The Boundary Commission would come of nothing. The membership of Ireland of the Commonwealth would continue and continue and continue almost forever. There seemed to be no end to Cosgrave's government's willingness to accept the heel of the British Empire still upon the neck of the Irish people. And we meet to commemorate this great man, General Michael Collins, but also to share in that sadness of the loss. And yet we have to look ahead. We have to understand that we are, for our time in the 21st century, beholden, duty-bound, no choice, but to meet again in a perilous time, on a gloomy day, in this edge of County Cork. A perilous time, perhaps even in many ways more perilous, because what we're talking about now is the very existence of the Irish nation. Not a sovereign republic or a free state or some political formula, but the actual existence of the Irish nation as a nation and as a people. And not since the Great Famine has the existential question of whether Ireland shall be or not be, whether the Irish people shall live or not live, been in the balance. But it is in the balance now, and it has been put in the balance by mass immigration specifically. Ireland is no longer Irish in the total sense of the word. We have given many areas over, And our government has colluded in giving many areas over to foreigners of all descriptions. Some of those foreigners are Europeans. And yes, in the long run and in small numbers, they could assimilate. But not in the numbers in which they have come. And we look at the people who are supposed to have come from the Ukraine. Yet it is common knowledge to anybody who actually knows what they're talking about that a Ukrainian passport can be bought on eBay, and it's not even that expensive. And so how many Ukrainians are Ukrainian anyway? And everywhere we find IPAS centres, so-called protection centres. When you look at the people who are crowding into these protection centres, you see they are not the kind of people who need protecting. In fact, the key question needs to be asked. If they did flee a war-torn country, if they did flee for their own safety, why did they leave their wives and their children behind? What kind of men are they? In their 20s, their 30s, and their 40s, who have come here on their own for safety and protection from Ireland. If they say there is a war in their own country, if they say their women and children are in danger, if they say they are in danger. No, we owe these people nothing. We owe these people nothing, even if they were telling the truth, and largely most of the time they are not. And so it has fallen to us in the 21st century to be the guardians of the Irish nation in this existential struggle. And we have no Michael Collins to lead us. And thus, we must lead ourselves. Thus, we must guard Ireland with our own hands. For there is no saviour to come to our aid. Clann exists as a political organisation that people can join and be involved in and be part of this struggle. And we know that there will be a desperate effort to silence us politically, not just in the media, not just in terms of the coverage we get in newspapers or the lies that are told about us, but literally, physically, we know this. Because some of the people behind me were involved in the National Party before, and they were there at the Ardèche when the communists came to what would have been regarded as a much more moderate expression of national identity, with hammers and possibly even knives, to bludgeon their way into that conference to silence people. We cannot allow a political organisation which is the lifeblood of the nation to be at the mercy and whim of communist mobs, of leftist mobs. And so, on Náisiúnta, the National Shield, the SN, is here too and will be going forward to make sure that the Irish people in the first instance get an opportunity to hear what it is that we have to say, that we cannot be silenced, that we are not here to create violence. We are not here to provoke violence, but we will protect ourselves. We will protect ourselves from the foreign invader. We will protect ourselves from the red mobs. And we will protect ourselves too from the overreaching arm of so-called law and order, as we saw it expressed in Newtown Mount Kennedy, as we see it expressed on a daily basis throughout this country, in Coolock and elsewhere, where the Gardaí go far beyond their legal rights and where they crush the right to protest. And where the government is determined, says it's determined, that Irish nationalism's voice will not be heard. We here in clanneireann, we in the SN are here for the determined will to see it that Ireland's voice will be heard, no matter who tries to silence us. We will act within the law. We will act as peaceful as we can. But we will also be ready to protect ourselves and defend ourselves with as much violence as is necessary. Make no mistake, Ireland is standing up. The Ireland of the independence movement, the Ireland of 800 years of struggle against British rule, is standing up now again against European Union rule, which is not European at all, but foreign to every nation in Europe. We are standing up with all the nations of Europe. We are the expression of that standing up and saying our voice will be heard and Ireland will continue. And Ireland will continue to exist, above all to exist. Because if current government policy continues, if iPass centres are opened by the tens and thousands all over the country, as they have planned and as they have sworn to do, and if local opposition is not listened to, and if political opposition is not listened to, and if more than that, if political opposition is physically and violently crushed by the enemies of Ireland, then the Irish nation will cease to exist. It is an existential struggle. It's not a struggle for a policy formula or for a budget proposal. It is about whether Ireland will live or Ireland will die. And we introduce, as I say here, the monument of our great General Michael Collins on the commemoration of his death. We introduce not only clanneireann as a political organisation, but the SN as a protection unit to protect the voice of Ireland as we go forward into the 21st century. We will have, in the next 20 to 30 years, we will either have victory or we will have death. There is no in-between. There is no politics about it. There is no percentages up and percentages down or first preference and second preference voting. It is whether Ireland lives or Ireland dies. And we will either come to full life again. We will either come to full fruition. We will either create our Gaelstar in the next 20 years, or Ireland will have ceased to exist, drowned in the mass of numbers from all over the world. Brought here by a traitor government, directed by traitor forces abroad. We are here to say this cannot happen. And at the very least, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down fighting to the last breath. Our son, the hÉireann, reign.